It's time to throw out the first pitch. Let's open the black book. Hey, yo, what's up, everybody? It's me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, and welcome to another thrilling edition of the Fantasy Black Book. Black. Right here on the Brawl Network. It is me. It is the Welsh, Scott Bogman. It's his birthday, so he's getting a little day off here. So it's just me and Welsh, and we decided it's just us today. It's time. I know it's hard because football is king. And believe me, I love me some football, but you know what? We're in mid-January now. It is time to turn the page and start talking about fantasy baseball prep. And that means the Fantasy Black Book that is now available on the Amazon. Go pick it up for hardcover. Actually, it's really paperback. It's not really hardcover, but whatever. If you leave it out in the sun, maybe it will get hard. Who knows? Or maybe give it one of those pills. Who knows exactly what happens then? You can also get it for Kindle and iTunes in a few weeks. But Welsh and I are going to start tackling some of the offseason of Major League Baseball, how it impacts your fantasy year. And even though, Welsh, we haven't gotten all of the big names to sign quite yet, which we will get to later in the show, there have been some monumental moves and some huge trades that have really changed the landscape. And I got to say, it's been a pretty exciting offseason so far for MLB.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, too, you got me thinking about, is like baseball and fantasy baseball have inversed because, we've been doing this. You've been doing this a long time. ITL, me and Bogman have been doing this since 2014. And something that has slowly happened over time is 2014, 15, you could do baseball, you could talk baseball February, maybe mid-February. Then over time, you start to bring it in. Now, when you start in January, you're almost getting a little behind. And that's what's so trippy about this, because preparation is happening sooner and sooner, even here at ITL. Bogman and I were doing it right as the baseball season ended. We already started prepping, and people are doing best balls, have really ramped up. And so what I'm getting at, though, is we're going to start talking baseball, which is fantastic. And we've been doing it at ITL. You're almost a little behind the eight ball. But baseball, if you were to look at the free agent signings and the moves that have happened in the offseason, you would think this is November, because nothing, there's a handful of exciting things that have happened, but barely anything has happened. So we're all prepping. People are doing 12, 13 drafts already, and you don't even have 60% of the free agent market signed yet, which is insane. It's insane.
No. But this is the trend. This is what we've seen the last few years with these very late signings, especially with the superstars, or sometimes it goes well into spring training. We've seen that too. And that's why I think people have kind of, to your point, they've sort of dismissed that whole normal preparation period of, we should wait until where everybody goes. You can't. You physically cannot wait until everybody lands where they're going. You have to be well prepared. And honestly, Welsh, I always say this in the book too. And you and I, by the way, if you're looking for, obviously all your draft strategy, Welsh and I do each specific league type in the black book. So that means we talk about, points leagues. We talk about head-to-head roto category, regular 5x5, and we break it down for the first few rounds, what it should look like, what your approach should be, what the player pool's like this year. And there's standalone chapters in the black book that way, because we know everybody's playing different styles of fantasy baseball. So we have to accommodate everybody and actually lay out real strategies, not just like vanilla generic stuff. But most of the time, unless a player is going to an extreme ballpark factor change, it really doesn't change all that much in terms of their value. If anything, players I find tend to be kind of flat year over year, or the guys who sign those big free agent contracts tend to struggle just a little bit out of the gate. Bryce Harper was one a few years ago. You can go back all the way to Carlos Beltran and a couple others. It seems like that first year sometimes in that new city can be a little tough, where they put too much expectation on themselves. Even look at Paul Goldschmidt a few years ago. That being said, that kind of leads us into our first guy who's changing. He hasn't gotten his extension yet, and I want to emphasize yet, but I do think that it is coming. And that's the Mets, and I can't believe we're leading with my Mets. What universe are we in right now that the Mets are actually something we need to talk about? But Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco, that was the big trade. They acquired both of them. Lindor's on the last year of his deal. If they don't sign him, he obviously gets the qualifying offer and they could get a draft pick, but I do believe they're going to sign him. You bring in a number 2 starter and you move back Jimenez, 2 prospects, and Ahmed Rosario. And we'll get to that side of the deal first, but let's get to obviously the Lindor side, because this is a huge deal for the Mets. Not only did they bring in a much needed starter pitcher for a rotation, Welsh, but I did this emergency ITL pod with you guys a couple weeks ago when this happened. And Lindor is a game-changing kind of guy. And more importantly, or most importantly even, someone who creates runs. And that's something that Met lineup has lacked. And I think that's going to have an interesting ripple effect to McNeil, to Alonso, to the rest of the guys, to Conforto in this lineup. So what is your take on the impact in a fantasy realm of Lindor? Because he can't move up much more. He's already a first round kind of guy. So what's the impact here with the move?
I mean, in theory, you could probably talk yourself into him moving maybe down or two a notch, just because from a ballpark factor situation. I mean, Carlos Carrasco, not trying to jump ahead, but Carlos Carrasco is someone that really benefits from this trade because you had like top 5, hitter friendly parameters and ballpark factors for Carrasco with Cleveland. You're now talking probably bottom 5 going to the New York Mets. So from hitter friendly to pitcher friendly in favor of Carrasco. You take that to Lindor. Lindor's kind of he's a relatively like no doubter guy. He's always hitting sweet spot. He's always putting the ball in. I actually have a vivid memory remember when he had that injury during spring training? It was like 2 or 3 years ago, and nobody knew, like, was he going to be ready? I was over at the Reds facility, which the Reds and Indians share a facility.
Right.
And this was during spring training, during the minor league spring training, and it was getting close to the season. People didn't know if they would draft Lindor, and they run these scrimmage games. And in there, you've got some minor leaguers, you got some close to major leaguers. Joey Votto is going to game just to get a couple of bats, and Lindor is in the game. And this was a game where nobody knew what was going on. Lindor's first game action since the injury, and he just destroys multiple baseballs, 2 homers in just this, minor league spring training game. And I had reported about it and, hey, everybody, get ready to get your shares of Lindor, because this is a hitter, injury or not, he's going to crush the ball. So do the ballpark factor. Does it really affect his value? Maybe it's minuscule, maybe similar to like Machado going from Baltimore to San Diego. There was an adjustment period. He got it. He's a stud, but I think it's the factors around that you're alluding to that are a big deal. It's more lineup protection for guys like Pete Alonso. Jacob deGrom is probably actually, in my eyes, maybe one of the biggest beneficiaries, because coming into
he's a better defensive shortstop than Ahmed Rosario. There's no doubt about that in my mind.
But on both sides, because coming into this prep season, I was Bieber number 1 guy. Bieber was my number 1 pitcher, a little bit younger, had done it 2 years, going straight in, strikeouts. But I was on CBS, and Scott White and I, this was a while back, and we were talking about Bieber versus deGrom because he was with me, and I had said, the one determining factor, this is before the trade happened, that might make me push deGrom over Bieber for the season is if we get more run support and defensive support for deGrom. That's all that he's just been missing the wins, and Bieber was getting those. So if you literally take offense away from Cleveland, add it to New York, and it's a benefit to deGrom, and now he's my number 1 pitcher, because defensively it's a huge upgrade. Offensively, it helps the entire lineup. It's got a ripple effect for the Mets that's going to be felt all year.
Yeah, and the Carrasco side of this deal is huge, because you're looking at a rotation that doesn't have Syndergaard going into the year, and we don't know what he's going to be. We haven't known what he is the last few years anyway. You don't know what he's going to be like when he comes back. Stroman didn't pitch at all last year because of COVID. He elected to not be in for the season. I mean, this is a rotation that had enormous question mark going into it. And I think now when you add Carrasco, who, there's not a lot of guys with a strikeout rate as consistent as Carrasco. A couple years ago, obviously dealing with the cancer and the illness, that was certainly something that was, took everybody by surprise, and he was able to overcome that. Last year, I thought the best case scenario, actually, we talk about the COVID season, right? The 60 games last year, and who had a good impact and a bad impact. I think he's one of the few players that you could actually say it was the perfect situation for him to come back, have a small sample size, not have to tax his body too much, allow a little bit more time to recover from all the things and all the treatments that he's had. And I think this is a great scenario for him as he ages into his mid-30s now to come in. He's still throwing the ball hard, and he doesn't have to be the quote-unquote guy in this rotation either. I think this is a fantastic move. And I'll venture to say it's the best 1-2 combination in the National League. And people will say, well, what about the Nats? And I'll say, you tell me about the Nats, because I don't know what Scherzer is going to be this year. I don't know what Strasburg's going to be, and Corbin coming off a disappointing year. So I'll take deGrom and Carrasco right now, and I'm a self-loathing Met fan, so that's saying a lot for me.
I mean, you also got Darvish and Snell, which will be interesting.
No, I'm talking about the East. I'm talking specifically in the National League East. No, just the National League East.
I'm with you. The Strasburg, Corbin, all of them are kind of a question. And you
got Nola and Wheeler, but Wheeler's very incinconsistent. I'm not a Wheeler guy.
The Mets are going to be a problem. I mean, you alluded to the strikeouts. Carrasco's had a 10K per 9 for 4 straight years.
I know. It's crazy.
Phenomenal. I do agree with you on the shortened innings. I think that helped. And another thing, you see New York, we're going to talk about it. You see New York, the Yankees. and the Dodgers both making moves. I guess the Yankees haven't been doing it, but the Dodgers have been doing it. Yankees did it the year before in getting bullpen. They've been focused bullpen. Dodgers just keep trying, and they're looking at Kirby Yates right now. Well, go and look at the Mets, right? I mean, this is the recipe for winning teams. You've got Edwin Diaz, who seemed to gather himself last year in the shortened season, but they've also got Dylan Betances. They've got Seth Lugo.
They added Trevor May this offseason. And apparently they're talking to Brad Hand. So we don't know whenever we're recording this if that's going to be done.
That's 4 or 5 pieces strong in that bullpen.
Very strong.
I look at the Dodgers thing, and it's like they've got Kenley Jansen. They brought back Trinan, Canley. They just signed. I'm drawing a blank. And then they are also looking at Kirby Yates. They're going to go 5 or 6 strong. The Mets are doing this 5 or 6 strong, and it's in protection of these starting pitchers. You've got more run support, you've got more bullpen support, and you've got pitchers that can go long if they want. This is a strong team, and Carrasco's a huge benefit. It benefits Marcus Stroman. You talked about Marcus Stroman a little bit. Marcus Stroman, by the way, a ground ball pitcher. Carrasco is going to greatly help him. I'm sorry, Lindor will greatly help him, but Carrasco also can move him back a little bit in the lineup, which is just another benefit. So the Mets team, the moves they made, phenomenal. Carrasco and Lindor, Lindor's an even keel for his value. Everybody else, I think, goes up, and Carrasco is definitely a boost.
And more to your point, too, when you're talking about DeGrom versus Bieber is who you want one overall, this strengthening of the lineup, strengthening of the defense, and strengthening of the bullpen that they've done, I can understand taking DeGrom over Bieber. I think you can certainly make that case right now, because that's a very strong situation. Again, potentially everything is always potential right now. This is the offseason, but and the Mets have to solidify an extension with Lindor. You need to do that. That must be done. I want to go on the flip side of this deal before we go to obviously the Padres, who are the next on this list of big moves this offseason. Jimenez. I like Jimenez. I've liked Jimenez for a long time. You and I have always seen eye to eye to this. I thought he did a very nice job last year in DFS. I know on DraftKings, Bubba and I were always trying to use him quite a bit and trying to get him in lineups because he was a nice lineup.
He led the league in stolen bases in the season within the first month, and he didn't start with the team as the season started. I mean, he's
a good glove. I mean, I think this is a guy that you could drop in there for a while. Ahmed Rosario, for me, still doesn't get good pitching. I'm not a big fan from a stolen base perspective. I get it. He can add you some stolen bases. He's going to get playing time. That's all fine and dandy. Talk to me about not only Jimenez and Rosario, but also the 2 prospects, because I know there's some young players here, but I know like Eric Cross is very high in the outfielder that went back in this trade, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the prospects as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I not to be that guy, but I'm the original Isaiah Green guy. I
know you are. So
I'm the OG Isaiah Green guy, because when the Mets took him in the draft, I've talked about, we talked about this a little bit on the ITL Emergency Pod, and I've talked about it on Prospect One, but like when the Mets got Isaiah Green in the draft, I was like, how is this happening? How are the Mets having the best? They got JT Ginn, they got Pete Crow Armstrong, and Isaiah Green is had a really good draft. They had a great draft, athletic outfielder. I think it's a great get. Jimenez is a huge boost. We talked about this also on ITL. Like, he's going to lead off theoretically right now for the Indians and play second base, and he's a contact hitter with stolen bases. That does really well. I think like all that value people assumed Cesar Hernandez would get last year, you can like start to bank that on Jimenez. He's still young, always made good contact. I mean, there's a legit shot at 25 stolen bases if he leads off the whole season and doesn't struggle. And he's always been kind of an advanced hitter. Rosario, I'm not that into. And
it's funny, you and I see this the same. Like, we're more excited about Jimenez than we are about Rosario, which I think is
over.
Most people are. I've been over Rosario. I would. What's it? Oh, like in Friends, over you. When was I under you? I was never a guy who saw it in Rosario. I just didn't see it. I didn't see the minor leagues and the major leagues. I thought, well, I'll give him a little time to see how it goes. To me, he's just not a very natural, fluid player. He doesn't hit good pitching, and he's made some improvements. I will give him some credit there. But he is not the player that we were sold a bill of goods on from the scouting department, for sure.
It's his offense, too. It's funny. I was just a guest on a podcast, and they had actually asked how I have a show, Prospect One, which is like a prospect fantasy-based show.
Go out there, stop what you're doing, pause the show, and go subscribe to Prospect One if you play Dynasty Baseball, because it is fantastic. Welsh does a phenomenal job with that show.
Thank you. And someone had asked like how it started, and I was reliving the story, and I was like, oh, it's funny. It actually started because I didn't even have the show made, and I got Jonathan Mayo booked, and I was like, I got to make this show. But the only thing that I truly remember about the episode was it was like the premise of the episode was obviously having Jonathan Mayo on, and we were breaking down Pipeline's top 100. And at that time, Ahmed Rosario was a prospect, and he was MLB Pipeline's like number 3 or 4 overall prospect.
Mhm.
And like half of the show was me kind of digging with Mayo to be like, can you confirm that this is a overall thing? Because if you were only looking at offense, Rosario wouldn't be in your top 15. And I got him to be like, yeah, he probably wouldn't even be in my top 20. And I was trying to prove a point of like, first off, this is, remember when you guys are looking at MLB Pipeline for your values on prospects and stuff.
Right, which is why you should be looking at the Black Book instead. Because we're doing values for fantasy, not values for reality.
And that's what's important. And Ahmed Rosario is always at a time, he was a better real life player than he was fantasy, but he hasn't been a real good anything lately. And maybe with Cleveland, he'll become, a solid defender. Maybe he's, maybe like Andrelton Simmons is his peak. He's like a 15-15 guy. He could probably get to that. But I think Jimenez has more upside. And that's why, Indians fans should be more excited. And Jimenez is the only of these guys in redraft that I would be interested in between Rosario and Jimenez.
All right, let's shift gears here for a moment, if we may, because the Padres certainly have been getting to work, and the Padres smell blood in the water. They think they can compete, and they're right. I mean, Tatis is right now an absolute superstar. They've got Machado, they've got the pieces. And this was a team that played well last year despite a bunch of injuries too. I remember when Tommy Pham was raking and then he got hurt. They had a ton of injuries they had to overcome. Hosmer got hurt. And they still continue to play good baseball, but the pitching certainly needed help. Well, they got that. They gave up nothing, in my opinion, to get Yu Darvish, who the last 2 years has been about as dominant as anybody else. Last year in a lot of drafts, Welsh, I faded the top-tier starting pitcher, and I took Yu Darvish everywhere just in case he was that dude again. And he was that dude again last year. And
Bogman's not here right now.
It is a shame. This is definitely Bogman's guy, so shout out to Scott Bogman. This is why you watch the video portion. So we're doing the little Sammy Sosa thing.
We're recovering from birthday.
But in all honesty too, to add Snell, look, I have Blake Snell issues. Okay, they're my own, but I cannot knock this deal. I don't quite understand what Tampa's doing. I like the haul that they got back, certainly more than what Yu Darvish was. I understand Yu Darvish was getting paid more. I get it. It's more about just taking the money off. But now you've added these two guys to this rotation. How does this change? I mean, also, Snell's now going to go to the National League. Now we'll see what happens with the DH. I've heard some rumors that they are going to actually go forward with the DH. They're going to announce it soon. So
it seems like it's lining up. Teams are making moves like
it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, but the Washington Nationals move, which we'll get into the next segment, when they brought in Josh Bell and Schwarber, I was like, all right, if that's not a symbol, then I feel like the National League is going to have a DH again. I don't know what is, but take me through Darvish and Snell and now what your thoughts are about San Diego's chances in the West.
I mean, I think it's got to be near the top. I mean, one of the biggest problems they have is it's like the other amazing entire NL team is in their own division in the Dodgers.
Right.
Dodgers just keep adding to their greatness. They keep adding to the bullpen. They've got a fantastic rotation of young guys. They've got young guys in the wings. They can make trades if they want. I mean, I would still be kind of shocked if we went into this next part of the season and the Dodgers didn't make a move unloading some of that young talent, because I just think that's the way that they can go. They can keep just pressing. But San Diego made the moves you have to make. I mean, the Darvish trade, I'm surprised they got that done, but I know there's a lot of money involved, and that's kind of what those trades end up looking like. They also got another really solid catcher in Victor Carantini, who was, I think he was Yu Darvish's personal catcher.
Well, yeah, I was going to say he's Darvish's guy, so I mean that kind of makes sense.
He'll be Darvish, but they
need some better defensive catching too. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, Nola's solid though. They traded for Nola last year, so they got Nola and Carantini. Darvish, they just gave up young, super young pieces. The only one of note is really Reginald Preciado, who actually I just talked with him a little bit about him with Ben Badler on Prospect One. We were talking about the J2 class. He was the previous year's J2 class for the Padres, and that was the big get. And then on the Snell side, it looks way better. There's way more possibility, but it still just fell a little bit short. Luis Patino with the Rays, I like. Cole Wilcox. I was completely inversing his name. Cole Wilcox. Will Colcox.
Will Colcox. That's what happens when you get in a fist fight with me. You get Colcox by it.
I like him. I'm not a big Francisco Mejia guy, but Snell and Darvish fit into this rotation just beautifully. I mean, San Diego's going to be a massive, massive problem. I think the only thing that they need to do right now in all of this awesome stuff that they're putting together is I think they need to get back some of those bullpen pieces. They've lost, they had traded for Rosenthal. They lost Yates. They lost Rosenthal. Right now, they got Drew Pomeranz as their closer and Emilio Pagan as their setup guy. So you get all these guys. Snell, who has a history, by the way, of not being able to go deep, probably partially because of team and injury stuff. Darvish has had some injury stuff. Lamet has had injury stuff. And Paddock had an off year. All guys can go deep into games. They got to shore up the bullpen. If you go and see the Padres pick up one of these big arms, if you bring back Rosenthal or they sign Brad Hand or something like that, or make a move, I think it's going to be the all-in click where the Padres are going to be, if not the team to beat in the NL, it's going to be them versus Dodgers. So I love the moves. And, we even talk about Ha-Seong Kim, who they signed over from the KBO, who I think is legit. I think Ha-Seong Kim, a lot of critical stuff on him, but I love the way he swings the bat. I love the power speed combo he has. He's young enough. I think it works. And all people do is use the old comps of KBO players to him. And it's like, of course, some of that's true. And you can't do a 1-for-1 with numbers. He's not going to be a 30-20 guy coming out the gates, but
right.
To look
He's
at
not be Chu coming out the gate.
But like what a lot of people do is they look at hey, look at He-Man Choi, or they look at Park, who was in Minnesota. They just look at these big bulky first basemen and make those comparisons. And it's like, that's not this guy. This guy was a Gold Glove type shortstop who's going to play second base. He's big, big upper body. He has a swing path that looks similar to Acuna. Like, I think he's a legit play. So the Padres have made, even though I think the single best move was the Mets this year, I think the Padres collectively,
collectively it moves everybody back too. It takes some pressure off Lamet. It takes some pressure off Paddock too, who honestly, there was a lot of pressure on Paddock this year and this
really
past season, and he failed. And it's whether or not that third pitch comes along or not, whether or not he can just be confident with what he's got out there. So I think taking a lot of pressure off Paddock is good. Do you believe that you will be back in on Paddock this year because of that, or are you going to just wait and see and let somebody else deal with that?
No, I think I will be. I've watched a lot of Paddock like in person. Actually, even last year, before everything got shut down, if there was one team I was seeing a lot of, it was the San Diego Padres. I saw his first bullpen session in spring. I caught 2 different games that he pitched in spring. And he was throwing the only mistake he made all spring was his former teammate Franmil Reyes. It was actually funny. It was the Indians versus the Padres, and Franmil Reyes absolutely launched one off of Paddock. And I think he started throwing his curve more, which was a new change. He had the change up. He was trying to get all 3 pitches. And then after the outing, over on the side of the building, Franmil and Paddock met because, these guys, they only stay in the stadium for like 3 or 4 innings during spring training, and they were hugging it out. And Paddock was like, "Oh, you totally got me." And they were talking about the at-bat, which was really cool thing. So Paddock seemed to have a really, like a really solid core going into this year, but he could not get his pitches together. And he couldn't consistently throw more than 2 pitches, and everybody caught up to him. That has to change. I have to imagine that's going to change. And like you said, there's a lot less pressure. And think of a guy who needs to develop a third pitch that just got added Darvish and Snell to the rotation to learn from. It's a huge move for Paddock. I would be a buyer on Paddock in Dynasty right now because I bet people are just out.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and the cost is at all-time low. All right, Welsh and I are going to hit a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Yankees starting to spend some money and some other teams making some signings as well. They're going to impact your fantasy team. You are listening to the Black Book on the Brawl Network, and you can watch us on the YouTube channel as well. So stick around. We'll be right back to break that down and where the rest of the guys going to finally end up. We got that for you too. Just hang out with me and Welsh. We'll take care of everything, baby. Black Book. We'll be right back after this.
The Yankees.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Black Book. And before we talk about the New York Yankees, we have to talk about some personal hygiene stuff when we talk about Manscaped. That's right. Head over to manscaped.com and use the code BRAWL because they've got some fantastic new products coming your way, including a new fragrance, which smells very manly. And look, you can ask for it for the holidays, obviously coming up here. Bogman probably sprayed a bunch of it, and that's why he had such a good time on his birthday. Next thing you know, all the ladies are on top of him, and that's why he can't do the show.
Hey, ladies.
Hey, ladies, the Scott Bogman is single. And of course, it's Valentine's Day, so ask for it. And again, go to manscaped.com. They got you covered. They got a phenomenal grouping of products there, obviously, to take care of all of your manly needs, and smelling good is a good manly need as well. I know Welsh smells fantastic. Everybody knows that in the industry. He's the best smelling.
I really look like I smell fantastic.
You look like you just came in from a run, I actually think. So you need this Manscaped new fragrance out there too. Because seriously, post-run Welsh, not the usual smelling Welsh that we're used to. All right.
I did shower though.
That's good of you. All right. Let's go talk about the Yankees, Welsh. DJ is bringing the turntables back to New York. He's got a $90 million contract. That's a lot of money. And it's interesting because it's a long contract. So basically they were saying, hey, we're going to pay you this money no matter what. Just stay. Can you just stay for a little while longer? He's going to be 37 by the time this deal is over. And the Yankees also signed a pitcher. We'll get to that in a second. But first, LeMahieu. I think this is a good signing. He's a versatile player. He's been terrific in New York. Great clubhouse guy. Very dependable. Carried the offense last year when Judge and Stanton went down, as they inevitably do. This is a very important signing. I'm glad they got this done. I thought it was inevitable that they would. You heard some rumblings last week that he was annoyed. He was ready to walk away. That must have been the negotiating ploy, because the next thing you know, 24 hours later, boom, the ink is on the deal. And I can't tell you, of all the players in the last few years, when you do all the work for the Black Book, and you have concerns about a player, I had a myriad of concerns about DJ LeMahieu leaving Colorado, because his splits on the home road side were not good. This was a guy.
What's hilarious? They're the same in New York. It's the same thing. All he does,
he just likes his own bed. Just bring your bed with you.
I guess what also is so interesting about him is he's the anti-analytics guy too, because if there's a lot of people, we do it from time to time, we'll just talk about specific stats to help further a storyline about a player or whatever, but you go and look at LeMahieu and you're like, hey, let's look at it. He's got to be he hits the ball a ton. What's his barrel percentage is 2.9. That's one of the low. Okay, that's bottom 9% in the league. Okay.
All logic. Well,
let's not look at that. Let's look at launch angle. 2.3. That's one of the worst that you could possibly. Okay, that's not good. He doesn't make sense yet. He has been he was top 3% this past year in expected batting average. He's been inside the top, actually 3% or 3%.
Crazy.
4 of the last 5 years. And one of the more interesting things about him, when you look at as far as what he's done in New York and the type of contact hitter that he is he hits it really hard. He makes the most out of it. He has hit over 300 against all pitches since 2019. So if you start to define fastballs, breaking pitches, or off-speed pitches, those are the 3 different definitions. He's hit over 300 against all 3 of those type of pitches last year and 2019. He's just an anomaly, and he's so damn good too.
Yeah, it's crazy. He defies logic. He is a ball player's ball player, and I think a very important move too. Torres coming off a down year, Judge and Stanton once again being hurt. You need some stability there, and I like this too, because from the luxury tax, how was it's almost like cap. Oops, the luxury tax standpoint. As more players of the Yankees continue to go to arbitration and things like that, and the payroll continues to balloon and all that, you actually have the inverse happen with the LeMahieu contract. It kind of evens out and gets lower. So this is actually a really smart move. The Yankees, you got to give them credit. Brian Cashman, I understand he inherited a gold mine, and he made the most of that with that core 4 group and all of that. But he gets a lot of crap for the 09 team and buying a championship, and that's fair because he did. But what he's done in this era of Yankee baseball has been super impressive. I know they have the money to make mistakes and be wrong, but their ability to turn the roster over and continue to bring in all this good young talent, and they have a lot of young talent too. Where they're lacking is the rotation, Welsh. Now, they have Garrett Cole, brilliant, right? Paxton's a free agent, but he was never on the field anyway. Tanaka, there's rumors he might even go back to Japan. You have Severino coming back from Tommy John surgery. And they went out there and they're taking a flyer on Corey Kluber, who, look, I think this is a good flyer. Corey Kluber, one of the most underrated pitchers, I think, of this generation. And when you go back and you look at the stats, they are stunning. And I, for one, was buying back in very hard to Corey Kluber last year, saying to myself, well, it was one bad injured season. Look at all the great years. I'm not ready to get rid of this guy. I'm not ready to discard him. It did not work out. He got hurt right away. Boom, it was over. But he went and he worked out. He signed with the Yankees, a team that's going to support him with runs, a team that's got a great bullpen. I promised myself I wouldn't do this, but now I feel like I want to buy back into him again. Now I feel like I want to do it one more time. The velocity was about 88 to 90. That doesn't really ring for me. I'm not really super excited about that. I want to see him in spring training first, see how he handles things. But where do you stand with Corey Kluber now that he is a Yankee? Because this was another necessary signing. The Yankees are thin at starting pitcher, make no doubt about it, despite the fact they got King and Schmidt and all these, guys coming.
Yeah, I mean, I bought in a little bit early on, but I'm cautious. I'm cautiously optimistic is the best way to put it, because I've done I don't know how many best balls so far, not like a ton, but we've been doing ITL mocks, trying to create a ADP, more of a consumer ADP than like, not that NFBC is not great, because it is, and you
Sure.
want to see what the high dollar stuff is doing, but also trying to like show some reality of where some other stuff is happening from a consumer basis. And I've taken Kluber there, I've taken him in some other spots way before he signed. I was very worried about the injury, but I kind of agree. Like, I'm the type of guy, if a guy has been pitching at a really high level and then injuries take them out, I want to give a benefit of the doubt. And sure, that we could be done. So that's where my cautious is with him. Like, is the injury, gonna make him be out? But what he was doing positively is he was throwing well. He threw for 25 teams about a week ago. He was hitting right around 90. And this was him working his arm up, getting all of his other pitches. He has been a phenomenal, and I completely agree, underrated pitcher for a long time, can go deep into games. And all he's got to do is get the health. And we've seen this before. Verlander, Kershaw have both gone through spouts. There seems to be this like early 30s to like early mid 30s injury issue that happens with these pitchers, these dominant pitchers that have to, I mean, we've both experienced that not as pitchers, just as 30-year-old people. But there seems to be this adjustment period in the early 30s that happens with these dominant pitchers that they go.
Verlander did it too.
I said Verlander, Kershaw, they go from dominance in how they pitch one way to needing to learn how to pitch and control their body in a completely different way. And everybody does it differently. Kershaw went, I think, to drive line and was doing some like, yoga exercises. Verlander kind of changed his scope, and
Verlander just married Kate Upton, and that seemed to work out. Like,
other different stretches and type of yoga you're doing. And Kluber just needs to find the same way. I'd love to hear how he's gone. That would make me feel really good, by the way, if we could get some stories between what he's done and how he's changed himself over the last 2 years with injuries. But sure, it's a buy-in. I'm worried he's going to cost too much, because he had like a 170 or 160 NFBC ADP or something like that for a while. In the top 100, I don't know, man. I mean, I'll be interested, but I don't know. It's risky.
I'm a big fade on pitching altogether this year. Watching what just pitching in general this year, and that is like very anti-Joe, and I know that. And the problem is I play a lot of points league, so I'm going to be very careful when I do it. Yeah. But in Roto, especially this year, like I'm going to take some shots on some guys, but I'm going to be super careful because the game has changed so much. I think in the last couple of years that. To take shots on pitchers in that top 100 and be wrong, it hurts bad, because you're missing you can find saves on the waiver wire. You can find some wins. You can find some guys who get brought up and some guys that emerge into rotations or get moved from bullpen to rotation.
Pablo Lopez.
You can't find 15, 20 home run guys on the waiver wire anymore. It just does not exist, because everyone's drafting those guys and speculating over the ones that might even break in, after Super 2 or after the All-Star game. So, I mean, it's a very different scenario for me. Pitching is really, and look, and it's also has to do with, I think we're in, and this happens. It happens with football. A few years ago, it happened where the running back position looked like it was drying up, and that's when the zero RB happened. And then that year, a ton of new running backs showed up on the scene and completely obliterated that theory. I feel like that's kind of where we're at with pitching right now. The old guard, the Scherzers, the Verlanders, the guys who have, been those steady guys are starting to age out, and that next crop is coming, and we're not exactly sure which ones are going to be the ones that carry the ball, but I'd rather start taking some shots on those guys later than take shots with the older guys. That's just
Barrios is consistent, not exciting, and he always tends to fall. Paddock is somebody that really fall. I mean,
I'm
I'm
gonna
doing
have a lot of those Cleveland guys. I got to be honest with you, Welsh. I mean, those
like
the
who?
Savalis of the world, those
Oh,
guys, like,
sure. Yeah. I mean,
you know.
Plesac was way too high, but I completely agree with you on Savali. Savali will
Mhm.
be on many, many of my teams.
And I thought
And
Tristan McKenzie was terrific last year too. I
yeah,
mean,
I mean, there's some stuff I'm worried about with him and
oh
maintaining, but
sure.
he was terrific. But like in the January version of our ITL mocks we're doing, I've decided this round I'm doing a team. It's actually exactly what you're talking about. We're through like 8 rounds, and I think I've taken one pitcher. And I
Mm.
waited until the 90s to take my first pitcher, and it was Paddock. And that's not great, but I'm going to build it later. But my offense is phenomenal. I got DJ LeMahieu. I have got Ronald Acuna. I took Mondesi. I got Judge. I got Jordan Alvarez. Took Chris Bryant and somebody else, and then I paired it just with Paddock. And I'm going to just pick up cheap pitching, and I'm going to build cheap pitching as we go, and I'm going to see how much I like that team. And guess what? I think I might like it the most of any of the ones I've done over the last 4 months,
It's very
because
telling.
I've had plenty of teams where I love my first 4 picks, and then the construction, I'm like, oh, it just didn't work. This so far, my offense, it's so good to your point, and I kind of think I'm going to be able to build some pitching behind it, and I'll report back.
Now, speaking of offense, too, the Washington Nationals are going to build some more because certainly last year, Soto's all world, but they certainly did miss Anthony Rendon in that lineup, and they tried to fill it with a bunch of veterans, and it just did not work. So they brought in Josh Bell, which I thought was a really good acquisition,
Oh,
smart
they did
forward.
more of it. You said they brought in a bunch of veterans, so they just did more of it by bringing in a
Well,
little
but
bit
in all
better pitchers.
fairness, I mean, Bell and Schwarber are still in their early 30s. You know what I mean? Like, we were bringing in guys who are 37 years old. That's a little different. I mean, Asdrubal Cabrera and,
Starlin Castro and
Howie Kendricks of the world. I mean, these are guys who are, well into their 30s. These are guys at the twilight of their careers, bringing guys that still have some upside left. And Schwarber's the other addition, too, as the continual, shedding of players continues to happen with the Chicago Cubs. I don't love it because I'm not in love with both of these players necessarily, and I think they both have significant warts. But I think it's worth a shot if you're the Nats, because if you just fortify the offense a little bit more, if Victor Robles makes another leap forward potentially year over year, if Trey Turner can actually stay healthy for an entire season along with Soto, and you get the pitching to bounce back, you're right in this conversation. However, I think that this is grasping at straws a little bit. If I had to choose, I feel like it's more the latter. I feel like it's more the Nats had their moment. They had their run. It was magical. It was great. And now, they paid Strasburg all the money. They let Rendon walk. And now this is going to be the repercussions of that decision here.
Yeah. This team is odd to me. Let me ask you real quick, because I kind of thought you were going to answer this in a different way, and Bogman's answered this. If you got to pick only one of the new Nationals to invest in, because I personally kind of dig the cheap moves that they're doing. You're going to spend all your money on pitching. You get some potential good buybacks. Like, I'm kind of still into Victor Robles for this coming year.
Yeah, me too. So in Roto, 100% still into Robles.
Yeah.
100%.
And they've got guys like Starlin Castro and Asdrubal, and they still got Carter Kieboom. But when you specifically look at the 2 moves that they made, where they bring in Josh Bell and Kyle Schwarber, if you could only pick one to invest in, because both are cheap, but they're near each other. I think let's call Bell 150 overall and Schwarber 170, because I think that's about what it is.
Yeah, they're in the neighborhood.
You pick which one is the one you're going to invest in.
I'll take Bell.
Me too. Bogman was Schwarber. I'm Bell also.
No, I'm Bell too.
I think that's the one I buy.
He's also playing for a contract too, and I always like that. There's a fallacy of that study.
In front of him, I think that Trey Turner in front of him. I think a lot of the high contact hitters in front of him. He's shown a really good work ethic before. He's been streaky. I think this works well for him. He's the one I'm buying into if I have to buy one.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing for a contract too, and some people will tell you, well, that's not a thing, and they're wrong because what happens is the data that they're using, and I used to have this argument with our buddy Jake Seeley because he did a little study on it, and I said, yes, if you're looking at everybody who's playing for their contract every year in Major League Baseball, that's a lot of players, and all of a sudden you're going to realize that a lot of players in Major League Baseball aren't that good. They're great compared to us, but they're not that good compared to Major League Baseball, and that's why they have so much turnover year to year, going to different places. They're on one-year deals. When you look at the numbers that way, it drags everything down. But if you just look at the elite players, the guys who, let's say, end up signing 3-year deals or more, it's usually they play at or above their usual totals. I would say around 80% of the time. I think the number was like 78 or 79 when I did the research a few years ago for Black Book. That's significant. And that's significant enough to me to give a shot here. Plus, when's the last time Josh Bell had any lineup protection? And now he's going to have Soto. He's going to have Robles. He's going to have Trey Turner. He's going to have RBI opportunities. So for me, it's absolutely Josh Bell by comparison.
Especially if that lineup, if it starts Turner, Soto, and then Bell ends up hitting 3. If they decided to do that, I'm not sure what roster resource is looking like. It could be Soto 3, Bell 4, Turner 1, and then
I think Bell 4 is a lock. I really do.
I think it works. I mean, they could bring Robles. See, if they did that lineup right there, you would have the opportunity for Robles to come back and hit 2 overall if they wanted. They probably put Starling Castro at 2.
Well, the Cubs used to hit Schwarber high in the order, which I always hated. I didn't like that at all. I was never.
I never liked Madden's we're gonna get these big bulky.
Let's have Rizzo too, and let's have Chris Bryant leading off. I don't know.
You like it from fantasy because that guy's going to get the at bat.
But he gets the at bats, but he loses the RBI, so it's like a double-edged sword. So it's like I don't know. I mean, Roto, I think you hate it. I think in points leagues you like it because you get more volume over a weekly basis. But I think in Roto you hate it because you want the guy to have more well-rounded stats when all is said and done. I want to talk about Liam Hendriks' addition too, because the White Sox are another team that's made some significant moves in my opinion. Now you have Lindor and Carrasco leaving that division. You have Nelson Cruz leaving the Twins. You have now the door open for the White Sox, who last year made the playoffs. The lineup is just sick. It's so sick that Luis Robert, I think, is slated to hit 7th in this lineup. Okay. That's how sick this lineup is. They play good defense. What's lacking? A little bit more help in the rotation. They got that with Lance Lynn. And now they've got a lights out closer, which was the other thing that you could look at and say, okay, maybe you come into the season and you figure it out. Then halfway through, you make a move. No. The White Sox saw an opportunity. They took it. I think this is a great move. I think everybody, look, the White Sox are 10-1 favorites from the American League to represent them, I think, in the World Series. The only better odds are the Yankees right now. And I don't think that's wrong. I think Lance Lynn was one of the most unsung, unheralded pitchers in the last 2 years in baseball. And now you're dropping him with a great offense, a great defense. You're going to have Giolito. You're going to have Keuchel. You might have Kopech back and see how he might eventually impact this bullpen or the rotation. The White Sox are stacked, Welsh. I love their offseason so far.
Well, one other I was speculating on ITL Baseball. Let me throw this at you. Is Nelson Cruz doesn't have a home. And current talk,
daddy.
Current talks right now say the White Sox and Cruz are not having positive conversations or having productive conversations whatsoever. So you got to start thinking to yourself, well, where are the homes?
The Twins aren't having? You mean the Twins?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I meant the Twins. The Twins and Nelson Cruz are not having productive conversations around it. So let's sit here and think for a minute, where are the places? You got to stay in the AL unless there's an official announcement on the DH. And then who are some teams that might be willing to make that? I mean, you can obviously have ties to, Cuban players and how they've gone and just the roster construction of the type of players they've been getting. But there's a big hole. They didn't re-sign E5, Edwin Encarnacion. They've got Andrew Vaughn, who they could bring up, the White Sox.
I think that probably look.
I think that's the likely situation, but I'm just saying there's a DH spot. Chicago has built a monster. Why stop now? Just like with the bullpen stuff with the Dodgers. Why stop now when you got your big pieces? Go and get Cruz on a 1-year deal and go all in.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to argue, but I think the White Sox are going to be formidable. I mean, I'm fascinated to see what they do with this team with Tony La Russa too as manager. I mean, if he even makes it to opening day as manager, but
if he Ubers, he might make it.
Maybe he's got to Uber his way to opening day. But the dude, I mean, if I was Tony La Russa, this would be the team that I want to come out and manage, right? I want to come out of retirement and manage this group. This group looks like they're ready to go. And Giolito's a star.
Yeah, he's it's 5 o'clock somewhere. This is great. What does he got to do? He can sit back and have his mimosa.
I'll tell you what, man. I'm going to get hammered in the dugout watch. They're going to be must-see television. Last year, we knew that the Padres and the White Sox were going to be entertaining, and neither of them disappointed. Both of them took the jump. And this year, they got better and significantly better. They both added starting pitching. They added the bullpen help there in the White Sox. I got to tell you, Welsh, man, this is, look at what the Twins are losing, right? And you look at what the Indians are losing. And I think they're both still going to be competitive regardless. But geez, it's hard not to buy into the White Sox and get super excited.
I completely agree.
And look, we know there's a few guys, some big names still floating out there. Certainly a big catcher, big outfielder, big pitcher specifically, and some other big names as well. So when Welsh and I come back, we're going to break those down for you, give us our, maybe our best guess. We'll give you where they might end up or where we'd like to see them, being selfish fantasy baseball people as we are. I want to remind everybody too to go out there and get your fantasy baseball Black Book 21 on Amazon right now for Kindle and for paperback. And you can obviously help out your season and get yourself ready to go with relative position value. And Welsh and I are draft strategy chapters, which are going to have you ready for every single draft, no matter when, no matter what. We got you covered. We'll be right back with more right here on the Brawl Network with the Black Book.
Black.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Black Book, and it's time for you to create your DraftKings account. That's right, because we're coming to you live via DraftKings, one of our sponsors here at Brawl Network, and DraftKings, one of the best places for daily fantasy and for wagering. Everybody knows that, but we also have a little deal. So if you go to dkng.co/brawlpod, again, that's a lot, so I will say it slow, especially for all you, Mets fans like me out there. I'll say it slow.
Tony La Russa.
I'll say it slow, and I'll try to do that thing where you kind of touch your nose back and forth over and over again. dkng.co/brawlpod, and you could go and we will match your first deposit. Minimum deposit is $5. Eligibility restrictions will apply. See DraftKings.com for details. But look, we got baseball right around the corner. Basketball's humming right now. You still got a little football left. So go to DraftKings.com and use that code and start playing today. And Welsh, where's JT Realmuto going to be playing today? Because so far, still homeless. I'm still not sold that he's going to go back to the Phillies. I don't know why. I just have this feeling like somebody else is going to swoop in there. So what's the prediction here for JT Realmuto? Let's start with the catcher.
I'm going to still say the Phillies, and I think it makes the most sense. The thing that really threw me off was Andrew Knapp, who came out and he had a public statement, almost like the statement to me was almost like someone had told him, yeah, we're not bringing him back, because he was like, hey, I'm not JT or whatever, but I'm going to work my hardest to be close to that. And I was like, really? Is that where we're going with that? But then we got a report out. And again, things could change by the time you're listening to this based on when we've recorded it. But then we get the news that the Phillies have upped their offer to Realmuto. And I look across the board, I think the Yankees have made their financial commitment. So I think kind of that's off the table here. So I'm not even sure where all the Mets have been the other one but they got James McCann. So I don't think
I don't think McCann, their catching situation was so bad. I mean, they had Tomas Nido and somebody else. They only had two catchers on the whole 40-man roster, and they were not good offensive catchers. Let's put it that way. Toronto, I feel like, is going to overpay for somebody. And I think Realmuto is really useful for Toronto specifically because it's such a young team. And I think bringing in a leadership guy like that and helping out some of these pitchers that they have also, I think that's the guy for Toronto to overpay for. That's my perspective. You're
saying Toronto. I'm saying Philly. I say he goes back to Philly, but you're saying Toronto.
Well, it's tough because Toronto, it's hard to convince everybody to go there, and because you have to pay a period.
They also got two young pitchers. They got two young catchers in Alejandro Kirk and Danny Jansen.
They do, but you know what? But Jansen's had a couple shots here, and he hasn't done it yet.
Yeah, that's true.
So you know what? I mean, those guys become trade bait then to go do something else. I'm sure there's a lot of teams would like some good young catching prospects. That's where my guess is. Let's talk about
to be another one. By the way, we could throw out Cardinals. They have
Cardinals would be a great spot.
They have not agreed to a contract with Yadier Molina, and Yadier Molina is talking about potentially retiring. So that could be another.
They've got a catcher there too. So I don't know. We'll see about that.
Yeah, Eisner. Yeah,
but again, turns into what? Trade bait. Trevor Bauer had an amazing video. I'm sure you saw this because you guys always seem to see the Trevor Bauer stuff before me, but he went and did a 15-minute video about how much he loves Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco, and he did it with a Mets cap on, which was absolutely hilarious. Oh. I have no idea where Trevor Bauer is going to go. Trevor Bauer has no idea where he's going to go. I give him credit, man. He's a show. Do you want to, if it's your team, do you want to make a huge investment in Trevor Bauer? Because he's all over the map. And I know this is a tenuous one because you guys were D-backs fans and you have your own personal.
Not Trevor Bauer fan is what you're trying to say.
Not Trevor Bauer fan. But look, nonetheless, where do you think he ends up after everything? I think the Yankees actually go out and spend on Trevor Bauer because I think that's how desperate they are in that rotation right now.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think I think the market has kind of dictated some teams that are out. I mean, I think the Padres are out. I think
Right.
the Yankees are out after they spent $100 million between LeMahieu and Kluber. I think they got their cheap
I
option.
think the Mets are out now that they got Carrasco. I don't think
I
they're going to go down this road.
also think the Mets are out with getting Carrasco because, once you get Syndergaard back, you have Matz, David Peterson pitch really well for them. So what's actually ironically happened is the market has completely just dried up
It
for the
has.
available team. So the one team, though, the team that I've thought since day one was the top guy is the one I'm going to stick with. And that's the Los Angeles Angels. They
I knew
have
you were going to say the Angels. That's the only other one for me too.
and they have
Is the
been
Angels?
super quiet. They actually just
They have.
signed Kurt Suzuki, so they got a new catcher. You might
Mhm.
want to get a catcher. I mean, though, ironically, you might want to get your big pitcher in before you start getting your catchers to talk with them. But regardless of the point, they've been crazy, crazy quiet. They acquired Jose Iglesias. They signed Kurt Suzuki, and then they've essentially just told us that Joe Adell is not ready. That's been their offseason, which is strangely quiet for them, what they usually do. You can't spend the money on Pujols and Rendon and Trout without getting some pitching.
I
And
know, but like that's my problem. Is that's the only reason why I didn't say the Angels because I don't know how much money is left in the tank.
I think they could. Well, I mean, that's a good point. As far
That's
as
it. That's
how
you
far
are
they willing to
100%
go.
right. You are 100% right. If one team needs Trevor Bauer more than anyone, and has to take the risk that is Trevor Bauer, it's the Angels. And also from the media perspective, he can be Trevor Bauer there. It's not going to be like being in New York. It's going to be totally different.
Well,
but I think part of him wants that zoo. I think part of him works better in the zoo. And the Bronx Zoo with Trevor Bauer might be the best television you'll ever see. I mean, it very well might be.
Obviously, these are like little tiny things. I'm just pointing out here. So no one needs to read into these because money will change everything. But there are little tiny things I'd point out to everybody. One, he has a company called Momentum, and it's his media company. Momentum is housed in Arizona, where he has been because of spring training, being with the Indians, the Diamondbacks, and then the Reds. And that company is housed out here. He is from Southern California, went to UCLA, and the Angels play in Arizona during spring training. They're all the tiniest, tiny things. But if he were to go to the Mets or the Yankees, he would be away from that. He'd probably just change his facilities. But I'm just saying,
the Angels
have a need. I think the Angels should try to pull off one of those Bronson Arroyo trades with Justin Upton, where they go to a team, try to find a team that'll be willing to take on his money, and they send prospects with Upton to free up some money, bring in Bauer. And that's the way you go. I forgot they got Raisel Iglesias. They have everything but a front line.
That's the thing. And you're right. Look, I think it's the Yankees and the Angels. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be one of those two teams. I definitely think you're right. What about George Springer? Because I actually think the Mets are still in on this very much. I think this is the one they're laying in the weeds. And I think now when you add Lindor and Carrasco, you've created a situation where it becomes very appealing for somebody to go, hey, I can go there and win. And I think they're looking for these high caliber kind of guys. It seems to be where the Mets front office is, and Springer is one of those guys. Like, I don't want to hear anything of noise about, Springer's a good dude. And I think bringing him in there, another power hitting bat, boy, that would really swing the East quite a bit. And again, I'm self-loathing Met fan, so I'm not the guy who sees everything in blue and orange. I'm the opposite. Yeah. But I feel like Springer is actually going to end up there, and he's going to come back to the East Coast, come back home.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the likely destination. I'll say the Mets. I think Toronto's a close second, especially after they said, it was really weird when they said like they are not comfortable with Dominic Smith in the outfield, which led to a couple things. Where are you going to play him unless you're going to start a controversy? Well, there you go. But where are you going to play him? Is there going to be a controversy with Pete Alonso if he can't be in the outfield?
What a lineup that is, by the way. Yeah. I mean, if you had Springer with Lindor to Conforto with Smith and McNeil and Alonso, man, that is a good lineup, Welsh.
But that's the thing that told me, again, this is another one of those I would stack on of why NL teams are very confident the DH is going to happen. But though they brought in Jose Martinez, which is a really weird one, I guess, to maybe play a couple spots. But like, what are you going to do with Dominic Smith if you will openly in public say you don't want to play him in the outfield and you don't have any confirmation on DH? So clearly, if he's not an option, they've got a massive hole in left field that's just waiting for Springer to fill, that's why I think I'm with you on that. And then Dominic Smith becomes the DH once baseball at some point decides to announce there's going to be a DH if it's going to happen. It's got to happen in the next like 2 weeks, by the way. I think there's no way you can go into February without it.
I've heard some inside rumblings because I now have inside rumbling people that I know that is where things are trending in that direction, at least for now. Let's talk about another guy on this list of big time free agents that we haven't got to. We talked about Bauer and Springer, Real Muto. Let's talk about Marcus Semien, because that's another guy too that 2 years ago had a huge season. I'm actually surprised that no one kind of has jumped on this guy. Maybe he's just waiting it out, but even before the breakout year, Semien was trending in the right direction. I know last year was a huge disappointment. It was a huge disappointment for me and a lot of other people who invested in him. But where do you put Semien right now if you had to like find a landing spot for him?
I mean, it's a great question. It's hard.
He's another one where the market's a little tough, I feel like.
I think Cincinnati makes a lot of sense, but they're in this weird spot where it's like, is Cincinnati trying to compete? They got a lot of young pitching. Right. They've still got some veteran hitting. They've got a clear hole at shortstop right now. I think Jose Garcia is scheduled to be the guy there. So I kind of think that's where I'm going to place him right now. I think there's some other places that don't have solid shortstops. Baltimore would be another, but why would Baltimore make that move?
What about Milwaukee?
I think it makes sense. Especially if they're not sold on Orlando Arcia.
Which honestly, I mean, how many years are we going to play that game?
I just think their offense is kind of met. I think their entire team is met. You know who would make a little bit?
I gotta tell you, I disagree. I'm worried about Yelich, and I think people should be worried about Yelich after what they saw last year for 60 games.
No, I said their offense is a mess. I think their
it's a mess. Yeah, that's what I mean. I think Semien actually helps. I think that would be a nice solution.
I think Miami would actually make some sense. I know they love
Jazz Chisholm and those guys.
Yeah, they got Jazz. Miguel Rojas is kind of like a team.
Yeah, I don't think they want to block those guys. Look, I don't think it's a bad signing. If they did, I actually think that's a signal that Miami thinks that they're going to be, things. Look, there's one more big guy out there too, and that's Marcell Ozuna coming off a phenomenal season, right? Maybe his best 60-game run ever. And, I know this is going to sound crazy. I kind of think like the Braves need him. Like I just do. The Braves struck out a ton last year. They were one of the worst teams in baseball in teams of striking out. Acuna's all world, Freeman's all world. I get all that. But man, it's like Ozuna was kind of carrying that team, and I think he's actually a good fit. I would actually see if you could get him to come back on a team-friendly deal.
Yeah, I think he fits there perfectly because here's what's tough. I think New York wants to have some type of a priority in defense, and I think Ozuna is the lesser of that, especially compared to Springer.
So compared to Springer, absolutely.
I think you look at Toronto, and Toronto looks at Springer because he's a defensive upgrade, and Ozuna is, I think, bad business for Toronto. You've already got Vlad in there, which you're trying to figure out, how good defensively and how much are they willing. And that's why I haven't seen Ozuna tagged to them. So for me, it's Springer is Toronto or the Mets. I think Springer goes to the Mets. I don't think Toronto is in on Ozuna, and Atlanta has a clear hole at left field and a connection with him. Teammates loved him. Offensively, he worked, and they are a great defense already. So like they can take the negative from Ozuna defensively because of Acuna, because of Christian Pache, who's a Gold Glove outfielder. So yeah, I think
I'm a big fan of that kid's bat, though. I don't think that kid's ever going to hit. That's just me. Not for what
he's got power. He's got big power. I just don't know.
Well,
I know Ozuna, Atlanta also.
Yeah. All right. 2-minute drill starts right now. All right, Welsh. The Philadelphia Phillies had the worst bullpen in the history of bullpens last year. So far, they've added Archie Bradley and Jose Alvarado very quietly there. That was a nice little addition. It's a good arm if he's healthy. But we've been down this road before with the Phillies getting guys who may or may not be healthy in the bullpen. See some Robertson maybe. Do you think that the Phillies have done enough here with the bullpen, or do you think that Archie Bradley is a guy that you can invest in as the closer?
I mean, I've watched a lot of Archie Bradley. And
I know you have. That's why I'm asking you, baby.
Archie is hot and cold. Like when he's on, there's a problem.
Perfect for Philadelphia.
Yeah, he only throws 2 pitches. He throws that knuckle curve and he throws a fastball. And if that curve isn't going, and he's just pumping fastball right down the plate, see ya, the ball's gone. That's the problem with Archie, is he hadn't developed anything in that fastball. I think he might have started to attempt to start throwing more of a grounder, like a sinker type of pitch, but it wasn't working well. Here's how I look at it though. And it's one of those reasons I also think it makes the most sense in the world why Romuto goes back to Philly is because they made cheap bullpen moves. Like they needed to make some significant moves in the bullpen. So you would think they'd be out there spinning dollar bills, and they're not. They've got Neris. They were able to trade for Alvarado, and they got Bradley on a cheap deal, which makes me think that money is going to be completely looked at to spend towards Romuto. But can Bradley do it? I think he can, because he's done it before, and I think he's continually learning and developing to try to be a good pitcher. And I think he needs to get more consistency. And a guy like Romuto, right, really might be able to push him as a catcher. But I think at best he's probably going to be in some type of a rotational save move with Neris. But I would pick Bradley as the closer right now. Especially with the investment of $6 million. But
yeah,
I think you could see some Neris and maybe even some Alvarado this year.
Gross. I hate all that.
Pants. We call him Poopy Pants because he pooped his pants while he was pitching a game. He told everybody that. Essie Pants.
On that note, I don't know how a better way to end a show. I really don't. So let's remind everybody you can follow us at Network Brawl. You can follow us individually at Joe Pisapia 17, at Is It the Welsh, at Bogman Sports. We'll be back again next week. And now that we're shifting gears into baseball, we're going to be doing our RPV versus ADP, Welsh's favorite game. We'll be breaking down a ton of other things for you. We got mock drafts. We got real drafts. We'll have labor in a few weeks coming up too. So much fantasy baseball, it'll make your head explode. So stick with us at the Black Book and go get your Black Book right now on Amazon. Go get it. Get ready, because baseball is coming. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For the Welsh, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.